All right, we're going. Welcome to the Red Alert DEFCON 7 version of New York Sports Nation, the podcast. On today's show, we'll take a look back at the Boston Massacre, the legal mugging of one very thin man, the Thin Reaper himself, and two heartbreaking losses for the Nets and their fans, which I assume are our listeners. If not, of course, I could switch up this intro. Which reminds me, as you rate and review us, please share your sports affiliations so I can make sure I pander to the right audience. But let's get back to the show. We'll take a look ahead to Game 3 in Brooklyn and Game 4, where the cavalry may be coming over the mountain in the form of one very Big Ben Simmons. Let's first welcome in our panel from the Pix 11 Sports Department, my very favorite sportscasting animal, Mark Malusis, the Moose.
What's going on, guys?
So nice to hear your voice, Moose.
Yes.
And our very favorite, he's extraordinary. He's no ordinary Joe Masseri. How are you, Joe?
I'm still recovering from the shock of last night's comeback by the Celtics, so that may be playing into today's podcast.
As it should. It was disturbing. And the legend from the basketball powerhouse in upstate New York, the man who crushed it wearing orange, the former first-round pick of the Knicks, and our first selection for this very podcast, the one and only John Wallace.
What's up, everybody? How you guys doing?
We're great. John, we appreciate you on Big Apple Ball. We appreciate you on the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
All right. So sadly, as Joe alluded to, the Nets are in a deep, dark 0-2 hole. John Wallace, is Game 3 the most important playoff game in Brooklyn Nets history? If you take into consideration, it could be a first-round loss, obviously, and their team has KD and Kyrie on it. It would be a shocking, first-round solution, and I think it could be awful.
I don't think it's shocking. It's a 2 seed versus 7 seed, A. B, right before the series started, we spoke about how good the Boston Celtics defense has been down the stretch. The number one defense since All-Star break, number one team in the NBA since the All-Star break. So it's not shocking. What is shocking is how they're making KD look. Like I thought obviously I picked the Celtics to win right on this podcast.
Yes, you did.
It's shocking that they're making Kevin Durant the first two games look like a mere mortal. It's Jason Tatum's playing incredible defense. The schematic that Ime Udoka has come up with has been incredible schematically. They're playing. They got a man watching. They got a man helping. They're playing them as good as you could possibly play them. And Kyrie came out and played great the first game, but the second game, he just didn't have enough. He only had 10 points, and that hurt them. So KD and Kyrie they need to both play good on the same night for them to win, because they don't have enough offensive firepower other than those two guys. So it's going to be tough treading for them. It's not impossible. That now we're going to really see what KD and Kyrie's made of when you're down 0-2. Let's see what you're really made of. And these are the games and these are the series that, stars turn into the legends and all that because of being able to come back or put themselves in position to win the series, even though they're down 0-2.
So KD in Game 1 was 15 of 24 with 6 turnovers. Game 2, 13 of 17, another half dozen turnovers. But he's getting mugged. John,
you're right.
Is it possible for him to pass out of these double and triple teams, and maybe, the Nets can exploit this a little bit?
You just got to watch a lot of film and see, anticipate the double team, triple team, play a little stronger. Don't let those guys, they're basically manhandling them a little bit, grabbing them, holding them. And they're playing like 90s style defense, like how we played defense. And I'm shocked that the referees are letting them get away with it. But now KD's going to have to make the adjustment, and I'm sure he will. That's why he's the best player in the game right now, because he will make that adjustment. But they threw something at him. Now let's see. Once Brooklyn goes home, if they're able to make the necessary adjustments to overcome that.
Well, John, I guess my question would be then is you're looking at Nash. What do you need to see? What's the adjustment from the net coaching staff to be able to get Durant a little bit more space?
Instead of trying to go one-on-one from the top of the key or, from his normal sweet spots, you might have to switch it up. I like seeing him post him up a little bit, because if you double him in the post, you're more of a pass away from a dunk layup. You're the skip pass away from a wide open three, depending on how they double. So I'd like to see Steve Nash use a little bit more of low post, mid post with Kyrie and Durant, because they both can really score from that area of the court, and it's much harder to double from that area. Because if you're doing guys are cutting and playing on the same page, you doubling from that area really puts the team at a disadvantage, because they're cutting in the spacing that can be created from those double teams.
So, Joe, the Nets came out fast. They built a 17-point second quarter lead. What do you think they need to do to try to hold on to this lead? They had a lead in game one as well.
Yeah, well, I think the games were reversed. They were mirror images of one another, because Boston led most of the way in game one, and then Brooklyn led most of the way in game two. And I think the reason for the hot start is the fact that all the role players for Brooklyn stepped up. Everybody's talking about how deep Boston is. I've been impressed with the way the role players on Brooklyn played on the road. They're not supposed to play that well on the road, but Nick Claxton had a really good game in game one. We saw what Bruce Brown did in game two. Goran Dragic played well. So their role players have really stepped up. The problem was in game one, only Kyrie was scoring. You got nothing out of Kevin Durant. In game two, neither of them were scoring. So the role players couldn't carry the load. And in the fourth quarter, what we saw happen was Boston stars stepped up, right? Jaylen Brown stepped up for them in the fourth quarter. Jason Tatum stepped up for them in the fourth quarter. And the bottom line right now is Jason Tatum is getting the best of Kevin Durant on both ends of the floor. I think I saw a stat that in this series, KD's 2 for 13 when Tatum is the primary defender with 7 turnovers. And I think in those matchups, Tatum only has 1 foul. Moose alluded to the fact, and John alluded to the fact that right now they're playing 90 styles defense out there, and Kevin Durant's not used to that. You could see him clearly getting frustrated on there, so that even when he does have an open look, he's not able to take advantage of it the way he usually is in the regular season, because it's in his head. He's looking for the guy who's going to come block him from behind or who's going to come underneath his legs right now, and that's exactly what Boston wanted. I think the fact that after the game last night, Kyrie Irving was talking about Ime Udoka and how he has some keys in his treasure chest there that he's giving to all of the Boston Celtics to lock him up. Well, it's working right now. And Steve Nash needs to come up with a counterpunch. And that's been the difference in the first 2 games.
I don't know if it, John, I don't know if it's keys. Listen, he's the coach. Nash is getting out coach. It's also effort and hustle. You're seeing Boston. They give you max effort offensively, defensively. Even when they were down 17, they had Marcus Smart, mic'd up last night, John, during the course of the game. And he's telling his teammates just one possession at a time. We're going to get ourselves back into it. And eventually, obviously, they did. Whittled it down to 10 at the half. At the end of the third quarter, it was a 5-point game. And then they had that unbelievable run starting about the 9.5-minute mark of that fourth quarter, which was an 18-2 run. So my question is, you look at it for Boston, they're exactly what they were in the regular season. They give your max effort each and every possession.
I think it's a very good point, Moose. John and Mark, when I was watching the game, the thing that struck me was the way in which they were fouling KD, roughing him up, triple teaming him, making him pay for everything that he got. It reminded me a little bit of the Jordan rules and the way the Bad Boys of Detroit attacked MJ. Was that something that was reminiscent for you guys, and what can we learn from that to see if we could spread the floor a little bit and open it up for some other guys?
If this is Jordan rules, it's Jordan rules light, because This is nowhere near the bad boy Pistons, in my opinion. This is, I guess, modern day Jordan rules in the way they were going after him. But that's what Boston wants to do. That's what Boston has done since January when they were, they've been the most efficient team in basketball. If that's going to happen, look, I honestly thought we saw Kevin Durant go into Boston during the regular season, and I think he put up 50 points in that game, albeit in a loss. If that's not gonna happen in this one, I just don't see how Brooklyn is gonna win this series, especially when they've been a better road team this season than they have at home. So it's not like there's a huge advantage going back to Brooklyn.
So last night, Kyrie came out and he only scored 10 points. And, Joe, you were talking about this earlier, that Brown scored 23. Curry bounced back from a goose egg to score 16. I think, Moose, you talked about Dragic chipping in 18. The question is, and John, you alluded to the fact that Kyrie and KD need to both score in the same game for the Nets to win. If they both come out and they dominate the ball, what's that going to do to the other three guys that played well in game two and kept them in it, gave them a big lead and, kept them in the lead until late in the game?
Well, even when KD or Kyrie is dominating the ball, they can. It's not just dominating to shoot the ball and score. It's dominating to make the right plays and then make guys open, get guys open as they draw the double teams. KD's been doing it's like odd to see him not being able to make these plays that he's been making his whole career. He's almost played 1,000 games in the NBA, and we've never seen him this frustrated and flustered from the defensive pressure that's been put on him, and the length. And you gotta take your hat off to Jason Tatum, because he's taking that challenge on.
Yeah,
he's accepting that challenge of KD and him. Basically, if he's able to knock off KD, that puts him up. Now you're in the conversation as one of the top 10 players in the league, because he's doing it on both ends of the court against the best player in the league. That's how Paul George is able to ascend himself. He played so good against LeBron when he was in Indiana that he was able to ascend himself to one of the top players in the league just from playing good against LeBron. And Jason Tatum is doing that right now. He's playing really, like you said, Joe, he's outplaying KD right now. No one would have said that when the series started. You thought, obviously, Jason Tatum's a really good player, but none of us thought he was going to outplay KD. And he's really outplaying KD, and it's shocking.
John, I want to ask you, does you played in the league, looking at Durant, is it just me? Does Durant look slow? Like, I don't know if it's just a case of, when he's putting the ball on the ground, and he even alluded to trying to play a little bit faster after the game last night. But it's almost like you're looking at a guy that, as you mentioned, it's been alarming the first two games, the way that stylistically, the way he's looked on the court.
Well, Udoka comes from the Popovich school of coaching, right? And Pop was able to make a lot of NBA stars and look rather mortal in their playoff series. And he's kind of doing the same thing. He's taking a page from Pop's book, shrinking the floor like they used to do in the 90s. When KD has the ball, he's seeing 3, 4, 5 defenders with eyes on him. And he's not sure who's coming to double, who's staying home. Horford's been a great hand swiping, getting steals from KD. Sometimes they're fouls, but it's the old adage, if you foul them every time, they won't call it all the time. So they call some of the fouls, and some of the fouls they're letting go because they're just literally, fouling them every single time. So KD's going to have to make that adjustment, and playing to these rules as those guys get up in them, Tatum and Marcus Smart, and they get up, do the old swipe and just get a couple fouls on them, then they'll back up, but Kyrie and KD going to definitely have to, bring it in game 3, because they go down 3-0. We already know it's over. So they're going to really have to bring it in game 3, coming back home. You're going to get your best from your, like you said, the role players played incredible on the road as a role play. That doesn't normally happen. When they go home out, the old adage is the role players play better at home. So I'm sure they'll continue the way they're playing. Now they need KD and Kyrie to play like they normally have been playing throughout their career.
And that's the scary part about this for me, John, is the fact that they went there in game one, they lose on this last second buzzer beater. They come out in game two, they didn't seem flat at all. The role players step up, which you don't expect them to do on the road, and your stars go missing. I mean, I think they were 1 for 17 in the second half, KD and Kyrie combined from the field. Like, that is absurd, the fact that those two guys can disappear to that level. And late in the fourth quarter, I don't know what it was, but there were 3 or 4 possessions straight down the floor where I saw Kyrie Irving on the baseline, and he was just standing there. And he was the one who seemed like he was taking advantage of those matchups in game one. And maybe it was the fasting. I don't know. We saw him go get food in the middle of, it was either the first or second quarter there. But something about it just looked like he did not have the energy. And they had a long layoff between these games. The schedule is set up for Brooklyn to win this with so many days in between games. And the fact that you couldn't take one of two in Boston, I just think it's trouble coming back to Brooklyn.
I'm with you, and that's why I picked Boston from the set. Because, all right, forget everything else. Forget all the X's and O's and everything. At the end of the day, it's a lot easier for Boston to score than it is for Brooklyn. When Brooklyn had a lead with 45 seconds to go in the game, Jaylen Brown comes out and scores so quick in 6 seconds that they were able to have those extra seconds at the end of the game for Tatum to get that layup. There's no resistance. Like Boston, even when KD scores, Kyrie scored, he had a great game. It still was met with some resistance. Those guys were just able to overcome that resistance.
Right.
But eventually, and the whole, when you're playing really good defense, by the time the fourth quarter comes, because KD, all those guys are looking spry, springy. First quarter, second quarter, high five, everyone's smiling. Fourth quarter, nah, we still here, and we scratching at your arms. We might slap your face as we're going for the ball, but we're going to win this game. And after a while, that just wears on the team. And it seemed like it's wearing on Brooklyn right now. Like the defensive intensity that Boston is bringing throughout the game is not wavering. It's not vacillating. It's staying at a high level. Even when they're down, even when their shots aren't falling, they're still playing really good defense. And that's what I said from the beginning is why I thought Boston was going to win the series, because they're just a much better defensive team.
Yeah, they're certainly proving it. So, Moose, the Celtics are 40-1 all time when holding a 2-0 series lead. So you're saying there's a chance. But for Brooklyn, Moose, they've got to get game 3. What's the key there?
Yeah, I think it's everything that we've been talking about. I think you can't get the docile Kyrie Irving on Saturday at home in Brooklyn. You got to have Kevin Durant be efficient, and he's done most of his damage at the free throw line. And you have to have the understanding and the wherewithal. The biggest concern, I think Durant will bounce back. Biggest concern is I think there's a huge disadvantage on the coaching staff. Nash, as compared to Boston. I think the Nets will win game 3 to make this series interesting. I don't think they're getting swept away. I think Durant, if he does not come out and have a virtuoso performance Saturday, I'd be really surprised. But as we talked about it, before and did this podcast last week before this series, I just think Boston's better coached. They're better defensively. They've got 2 young superstars in Brown and Tatum, Smart Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, when you have a guy like Pritchard stepping off the bench in the fourth quarter last night and playing the majority, Smart didn't come off the bench until about the 5.5-minute mark of that fourth quarter, and Pritchard played really, really well and hit some big shots and made a couple key passes, played well defensively. It tells you all about this Boston team. Horford was a stud before he fouled out of the game last night. They're just a better basketball team. They just are. And I don't even care if Ben Simmons returns Monday in a game 4, if this is a 2-1 series. What exactly are you going to get from Ben Simmons? He hasn't played basketball in a year.
Well, that was my next question. Since last year's playoffs, John, what can we expect or hope for out of a Ben Simmons return? Can we get 15 good minutes of defense, maybe 5 hard fouls that can make a difference? What can we expect out of Ben?
I think, first of all, luckily for Ben and his game doesn't need timing and all that. So the fact that he's been away for a while, he's been practicing with the team, is not going to, that normally affects your shot and things of that nature. And we already know he's not even, looking to score like that. But he can be a threat, especially getting to the basket, layups, dunks, whatever. And if he's able to play a little bit, everyone has to stay home now. And whoever's guarding him has got to stay in front of him, whether it's Horford, Tatum, he's going to put a lot of pressure on the defense getting downhill. And when you start coming in help after a while, he'll make the right play and get guys involved. I just don't know how much he can play and how much that's going to disrupt their rotation already. Because he's obviously going to take minutes from someone. I'm not sure who. I would like to see the Nets go into real playoff mode, more of half-court basketball, and playing LaMarcus Aldridge and trying to take sides of their advantage and their wisdom and being seasoned vets, winning the game that way, slowing it down, making it every possession even more vital, taking the pace down, and just playing more of a slower pace, because you playing at a faster pace, it really is conducive to the style that Boston plays with their players, their younger team. KD's got a lot of miles on him. So he doesn't need, running all the time. Slow it down. Get him in the mid post. He's unstoppable in mid post. And it's so much harder to double him from that mid post area. So those are some adjustments I would definitely make.
Hopefully it'll help. John, obviously, you played it at Syracuse when the Big East was the Big East. You played against St. John's at the Garden, Georgetown, and DC against really hostile crowds. Can you tell us from a player's perspective, and what is your perspective on Kyrie and the way he responded to the Boston fans in Game 1?
I love it, and I think that the NBA should look into not finding fans or making them leave, but just make sure they're not stepping over the line. But if a player responds to them, someone's cussing you out or saying whatever they're saying to you, you should be able to respond to them, especially if it's just a gesture. I don't think that was egregious. I don't, what he did. Someone said something like, basically, F you, I'm gonna keep giving you guys these buckets. But the fact that you can say whatever you want to say to a pro athlete. And, obviously some fans have gotten kicked out of games and stadiums and arenas and all that. But for the most part, you can say whatever you want and they're not able to say anything or retaliate. They ought to look into that. As long as within the lines, you should be able to say things, and you make it fun nature. How Jordan used to say, when someone talked to him, he's saying to the crowd, was that guy big enough that I dunked on this time with it? So, there's ways, you don't want to take that aspect of the game away from being able to interact and having a little banter with the fans, even if it's, not all in, fun nature, but it's still good because it's in competition, So I didn't like that they fined him or made a big deal out of it, because the people he was responding to, they were able to just go home and life was, nothing happened. So I think it should be the same thing for Kyrie.
Did you experience anything like that? Did you experience fans, from rival cities?
Absolutely. Man, are you kidding me? Do you remember the guy in Washington with the Bullets?
Robin Thicke, I believe his name was.
That guy he knew all your stats.
Yep.
Your worst deficiencies.
Yep.
He knew everything that was wrong and bad about you in your life. He knew about it.
Yeah.
He'd bring it up at the game. And, eventually, I don't know what happened to him. They got rid of him, but for years, he was bashing guys. And you had to handle it. Now, you said what you said to him. I definitely said some things to him. Look at that guy. So it was easy to get back at him. He wasn't back at him. You know what I mean? But, I come from that school of doing that. That's, you sit around and you say something about me, I'm definitely going to find some deficiencies about you and magnify them and make them funny. I'm definitely going to do that. So it never bothered me.
John, when a fan goes and does the research, right? And because, I mean, some of these fans do that. And, like, I mean, for all vulgarity aside, but you think about some of the fans out there who organize chants at certain things. I mean, do you respect that? Because you want that from your fans, right? When it comes to the opposing team coming to town. But do you respect that as an opposing player? Vulgarity aside.
I respect it. I welcome it, because for me, as an opposing player on the receiving end of that, sometimes I love shutting that whole section up, because that's what a good game does. You can shut everyone up. You can look at them the whole game, and as you win the game and have a good game, they're not saying anything. They're just quiet as a church mouse.
And if you look at Boston last night, that place was quiet until the fourth quarter. Like nobody. I mean, you could hear a pin drop.
Points, Joe.
Yeah, like when you're getting ran out the building when you're down 17, there's nothing to be happy about. You don't even want to go and get popcorn or candy. You just want to sit in your chair and look miserable. You know what I mean?
Yeah. John, what do you say though to Barkley and Shaq, who ripped Kyrie for his behavior?
Well, I mean, those guys.
I mean, telling him to man up, stop whining. We went through it.
Well, because that's the era we played in. Like, we dealt with that guy in Washington. We dealt with other hecklers. We dealt with, guys that you're playing against saying things, and you just, you said what you had to say, and you kept it moving. But you let your game talk for you also. But I don't mind that he made a gesture, because maybe someone said something outside the lines. We don't know what was said to him. There are certain things that can be said to you that would, and Barkley should never say that, because Barkley was provoked and spit on someone. And so, I mean, for him to say that, it's very hypocritical.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, we went through it last year at the Garden with Trae Young, and they were basically chanting in, and he did a bow and threw kisses to the crowd. I mean, there are on video of Celtic fans saying, to Kyrie Irving, LeBron's not here when he was a member of Boston. Let's also remember, I mean, Kyrie up in Boston was an absolute disaster. I mean, and was a massive headache for that franchise and couldn't lead his way out of a paper bag. So, I mean, there does come that layer to the story and that history to the storyline up there as well, to where the Celtic fan does not forget it. But, I mean, to the point where a Celtic fan yells at him, Kyrie, you suck, and he basically says to blank him. I mean, so, I mean, there does come a point
But
where...
is that what was said? Do we know that was
Well, there's video of it. One of them. In the hallway. In the hallway there was. I mean, it's all over social media. I understand in the game. But what was said to Trae Young last year during the course of the game?
He was spit on.
Absolutely. Did Trae Young give the crowd the finger?
That's just how he responded to it. That's not the universal way to handle it. We all handle it differently.
And that person that spit on Trae Young got banished from the Garden forever. And rightfully so.
I mean, but this is a cumulative thing in Boston too with Kyrie. I mean, he had a bottle thrown at him last year, right? Like when he was up there. This isn't.
Yeah, but
the
where do you
first
draw?
thing.
Where do you draw the line for fans? So like when LeBron went back, he had to face so much vitriol and visceral hate. Same thing with Vince Carter. Like, where do you draw the line for fans being able to retaliate or having a fan kicked out for life? Like, where's the line?
Well, I don't think you should. I mean, number one, you should never throw anything toward a player on the court. You should never spit at somebody. I don't care whether you're a basketball player or a human being. I mean, that kind of stuff. There should be no physical altercation. But if somebody's chanting my name or saying, I do think there's a point of it. Well, that's what, going on the road in the NBA playoffs. I mean, we all remember, the Darryl chants against Darryl Strawberry by the Boston faithful in '86. I mean, there have been these, that's what it is of going on the road as an opponent in these atmospheres, right? So, I mean, I've never played at Utah. You have, John. I mean, all I hear is that the Jazz fans are unbelievably nasty. and that they're an awful fan base for road teams to go in on, right? So, and you've experienced that. I've never heard that. I've just read the stories about it. I'm not telling you everything is on the table for what fans were saying, but I do think there's something to be a professional. I mean, Kyrie's getting paid to go out there and keep his composure on the court, and he's out there sticking the middle finger out, and we're all watching. Then when asked about it, he's defended himself.
But Moose, here's the thing. Right now, we're at a time with everybody having a camera on the sidelines and social media that we see more of these interactions than ever before. So I think that and hear more of these interactions than ever before, because we saw KD basically get fined for the same thing, telling a fan to, shut the F up when they were saying, like, hey, you just got to step up. That wasn't even anything. I don't know what it was like previously. John, I'll defer to you here. You tell us. But I'm sure there were guys who were cursing at fans back in the 90s and in the 80s, and it just wasn't caught on camera and videotaped the way it is. I almost think that giving the middle finger is a little bit less than actually saying the F word. I mean, it makes Julius Randle giving the thumbs down a little bit more sympathetic if you're going to do it in code. I said this back then. It was like Ross and Friends when he made up his own signal for the finger. Or the Mets, what they did with Lindor. I mean, like you have to have some I'm sure this is something that's been going on. Some players were cursing back at those fans in the 80s and 90s. We just didn't see it as much because not every fan had a cell phone that they were recording the reaction. John, is that true?
That's a great point, because I'm telling you right now, being in the thick of it during that time, you can cuss a fan out, you can cuss the refs out. Jordan used to talk to those refs like they were, and get away with it. They were not even like they wouldn't even look his way sometimes. So that is a great point, because the world we live in now, and the social media world, and everything is like immediately known to the world as it's happening. That's why everyone knows that everything is going on in the game. But back then, you're right. You were able to talk and interact with fans, and if they use vulgarity, it would be reciprocated. If they were having good fun natured with you, you do the same with them. So you just fed off their energy. Whatever energy came your way, you return that energy, and you should be able to. And that's all Kyrie did. He returned that energy.
I think the line is a lot more clear than anybody has said it is. I think that the line comes down to decorum. I think if a fan swears at a player, I think they should be banned from the arena. I think if somebody came into Pix 11 and swore at Moose or Joe for your sportscast, or me for the way in which I produce or run a department, it would not be received well. And I think that first and foremost, the league, like you said, Joe, there are more phones, more of this is getting caught. I think that if they step over the line of what's acceptable in normal society, they shouldn't be allowed back in an arena. Just because you pay for a ticket doesn't mean that you can swear and degrade somebody, especially somebody you don't know. On the flip side, if they're making fun of your free throw shooting, your stats or something like that, or they're chanting Daryl, like you pointed out, Moose, that I think is fine. And if it comes to that, I do not agree with Barkley. I do think players are role models. I do think kids look up to them. I do think that there needs to be a certain amount of restraint on their part. But I mean, players are human beings also. And I think that it's gotten out of control. And that's what I think.
Yeah. And as a father, Todd, and I know you think about this too, and I'm sure you do too, Moose, like thinking about going to a game, like I don't want to take my kid to a game. The part that I want them to learn is enjoying the game and being there when your team is winning and the cheering and being in that atmosphere. But that atmosphere is so
you want to change the atmosphere?
Now.
Ban alcohol. You can change the atmosphere right quick.
Yeah.
You want to ban if you're
or limit it.
About
you can limit it. You don't have to ban it altogether.
But
now you're messing with the bottom dollar.
Right.
I understand, John, but I totally agree with you. But that's why Woj got the criticism that he did the other day when he brought up gambling, even though it's not legalized in Massachusetts. Yeah. Yeah, but here's the deal is that you're really, and listen, I agree with you. I don't go curse out people, this and that. Like last time I went to a Giant Washington game with my dad at the Meadowlands, out at MetLife, I had a guy in front and behind us cursing a blue streak the entire game. When I've gone to a Ranger game or gone to a Knick game and brought my boys to those games, yeah, you hear people and you say to yourself, well, you hope. What the case is, you hope that they look around them, see kids around them, and then curtail their cursing. But unfortunately, you don't see it. It's not something I do, but I understand. And I was embarrassed for the Knick fan last year when they were doing that at Madison Square Garden because that kind of defined that place for a short spring run in the playoffs. So, but you're right, John. They'll never ban alcohol because they make too much money off of it.
Mm-hmm. So now we might as well figure out another way because we know that's not happening. And you can, like there are lines that are always going to be crossed a little bit. Just how bad is it? What's acceptable? And I think when you start, it's not even so much if you swear because I don't, but it's like as you start dealing with people's like getting personal. Like if you say you suck at free throws, whatever, that's. When you start getting into someone's personal or something, and I think that's when you should have the right to retaliate. I know I would, regardless of fine or not, because some things you say to me, I'm just going to react in a certain way because that's just the way I am.
Like I remember, like last year, I thought the fans when Milwaukee went on their championship run, and they're counting off the amount of time with Giannis at the free throw line. That's funny. Yeah. Like it's just. It's just funny, and that's a good job by a fan base.
But you know what Giannis did?
He hit his free throws.
He hit so many free throws in the last game. They stopped chanting.
I agree with you. I understand. So he got his revenge, but that's what I'm talking about. Good-natured fun. Like you can appreciate that.
Absolutely.
You can appreciate that. Like, that's funny. Or when they used to count off the dribbles, when they used to do the same thing with Karl Malone, because Malone would have use his sweatband, wipe his forehead, sit at the free throw line, stand there, stare. And they used to count it off at times with Karl as well. But you're right. You get your revenge. What do? You hit the free throws, and that nonsense comes to an end.
Well, I think we've done a good job, guys. I think that we fixed the Nets. I think we fixed basketball. All in, 44 minutes.
The only way we're fixing the Nets if they get a different opponent, because John called it before the series started. He was all over the Celtics in this series, and I don't think anything's changing.
No.
Their defense, man, they're playing great defense. They're making you earn every basket you get.
Yeah.
I think that's their identity. They've been playing that way the whole year of 2022. Since 2022 has been here, the Celtics have been the best team in basketball.
Yep. And they certainly looked like it in the first two games of the playoffs. Moose, do you have a last word?
No. I guess I want to ask John just away from this series for just a second. And what about the performance by Embiid last night in Toronto? Ooh. Hitting that three at the buzzer. Doc calling the timeout with 0.9 seconds to go on the shot clock. What about what you saw from Joel raising the level? Harden doesn't look the same that he did in Houston or briefly with the Brooklyn Nets. But what about, a guy that could easily or should be the MVP in the regular season? What about Embiid so far and his performance last night against the Raptors?
That was poetic justice. After, being there in 2019 and leaving the court crying after Kawhi Leonard hit that big shot against them. And to go up in Toronto in the first game of the series and to really put a vice grip on, because Toronto, you're gonna have to beat them. They're well coached. They're championship caliber players on that team that won the title in 2019. So they're not gonna just give you the game. They're not gonna lay down. But man, did Philly just take it from them? And Joel Embiid, you're right. He's probably gonna end up being an MVP this year, and he's well deserved. And he's going to put the game on the team on his back, but I'm just not sure if James Harden at this point in his career could turn it up when needed in the playoffs, especially look like they're going to be in a collision course with Miami Heat in the second round. We're going to find out really early because we all know Miami's Heat's intensity and defensive IQ is going to be, at an all-time high. So we'll see how they respond in the second round. But hats off to Joel Embiid. What a big time shot to send them home.
Joseph, final thoughts?
I think that the Nets will bounce back in game 3 because I can't see Kevin Durant having 3 bad games in a row. Not to this level. And I think the role players will do enough at home, but I don't think that the Nets will be able to turn the series after dropping those first 2 games the way they did in Boston. I've been impressed with Jason Tatum, and I don't know that Steve Nash can outcoach Ime Udoka in any of these games right now. He seems to have his number.
John, final thoughts?
Hey man, I'm looking clairvoyant. I think Boston. I'm gonna roll with Boston.
Well, I gotta say, John, you're looking like a genius right now for sure and for certain. I hope Joe's right. I hope the Nets can at least make a series out of it. Pull off game 3, make game 4 interesting with Ben Simmons coming back, and then see what happens going back to Boston. But everybody, I'd like to thank John, Moose, and Joe for their insight and the lively conversation. I'd like to thank everybody for listening. This is Todd Ehrlich until the next podcast. Thank you. Have a great day. Enjoy the games, everybody. He's gone. Ladies and gentlemen, he's gone.